myself Vaibhav. In today's session, we are seeing that the USDJPY is trading with the downward bias, and it looks likely that we might see USDJPY sliding towards 108 level. So, in today's session of Market Movers, we will be focusing on this aspect of possible correction, pushing the USDJPY further on the downside, and we will see what are the technical levels which can be helpful moving forward if you want to optimize the risk reward while taking the trades in the USD JPY. If we consider the trading context for the day, the financial markets remain in a sideways trajectory. We are not really seeing big moves happening in the equity front, but there is this crude oil which is moving quite sharply after the losses of almost 6 percentage point in last week. Even in today's session, we are seeing that the light crude oil is down by more than 4 percentage point, and at the moment it is trading below the important level of US dollar 60 per barrel mark. And I think this is happening because of the strength in the dollar, and also some concerns are emerging that because the economy has picked up momentum a lot earlier than anticipated, we might see the central banks tightening the monetary policy earlier. But that is something which we have seen that most of the central bankers have emphasized that they are in no hurry, even though the economic indicators are looking a lot better than prior anticipated trajectory. And the same thing which has been the case also was emphasized by Mr. Powell in his testimony before the House Financial Committee. And the text of this appearance was also released prior to this testimony, and from that we can gather that the Fed is looking at the economic recovery as far from complete, and even though the economic indicators, including the unemployment rate, is looking a lot better, but if we consider the unemployment rate, the one thing which we have to keep in mind is that participation rate also remains low, and as a result of that, Mr. Powell said that it is kind of underestimating the labor market shortfall. And if we consider other aspects, including the retail data and other data points, there we also have to keep in mind the base effect because of which the growth is looking a lot better, and same logic can be applied to the inflation also. There also the Fed is expecting the inflation to remain on the higher side this year, but it is not expecting it to be persistent. And even if that happens to be the case, the Fed is quite confident that it has the tools at its disposal using which it can tame the inflation if that becomes the concern at any point in time. So the Fed is fairly confident on that front, and now we will move to the technical aspects where the instrument of choice are USD and the Nasdaq. Let's see what's happening in the USD first. This is the daily time frame chart, and here, as I had said in yesterday's market movers session, we did see the USD declining in today's session. At one point in time, it had gone to touch the levels below 108.5, but from those levels, it has rebounded, and for the time being, it is holding closer to the midpoint range for the day around 108.7, just below that. And I think moving forward, it will be interesting to see how it goes ahead. On the higher side, we have the important resistance coming into play closer to this 109 level, and keeping that in mind, I think we can hope that this correction is likely to take the USD on the downside. And as I said, this is a part of the correction, and I'm not really talking about the trend reversal. unfolding in the USDJPY. So if we consider this rally, the impressive rally starting closer to 103 and extending all the way above 109, this sort of correction of say 100 pips shouldn't really be uh, surprising. Now, if we want to take advantage of this situation, we have to keep in mind that we have the USD caught in between these third resistance and second resistance of this month's pivot point series, and the fact that it has climbed above the second resistance and hovering closer to these levels is also the testimony of its steep rise, which has already unfolded in this month. And after that, it has traded almost in a very tight range, in a range bound manner for last 2 weeks. And this time also, in this week, we are not really seeing fresh momentum, but the downward bias is evident after getting closer to these 109.3 levels. It has shifted gears and it has traded sideways with the undertone being a bit bearish. And keeping that in mind, we can look for some scalping opportunities where the focus can be to go short whenever we see some move which is likely to get us the optimum risk reward ratio. And for that, we will mostly have to rely on the lower time frame chart as these both technical formations, the regression curve, as well as the pivot point series are not really going to be much helpful apart from the fact that they are pointing to the overbought situation. And as the USDJPY has now entered in the lower band of this regression curve, I think it is likely to flatten moving forward, and we might expect some even a slightly downward bias creeping in as the week proceeds. And if we have to consider some levels which we can utilize as the decisive marking points, I think this 200 SMA area should be kept in mind, which is there around 108.90 levels. So this is the price area which can be utilized as a marker. So as long as USD price action is unfolding below it, we can be fairly confident in our trades while going short in the USD So even now, if we see that USD consolidates and hovers closer to 50 SMA zone, and if in tomorrow's session we get the opportunity after due consolidation where we don't really observe any upward bias, we can go short in the USD with possible targets of today's low or even beyond that. And in due course of time, in next couple of days, I am expecting the USDJPY to slide towards 108, and that is what the title also suggested. And on the higher side, the stop loss is going to be fairly sharp if we are targeting the entry anywhere in the price band of 108.7 to 108.8. The stop loss can be kept just little above this 200 SMA area, anywhere closer to 108.95, and I think that should be good enough for the risk which we want to be on the optimum side, as we don't really want to take too much risk, because in trading any decision can go wrong, and we shouldn't be losing too much money if that happens to be the case. Now moving on to the Nasdaq has found some buying momentum after correcting the most in the major equity indices. Nasdaq has fallen out of favor after rallying superbly for last couple of months, almost a year. It's been going higher and higher after its steep decline, and in the mid March of last year. From there onwards, it turned the corners and went on to make all-time high. And from those levels, we saw almost closer to 10 percentage point correction happening. But from those levels also, it has now again rebounded, and it looks like that buyers are willing to get involved, as we have seen the correction already in place, and this might be the time to take a fresh bet. But moving forward, I'm not really expecting big moves. So we have to keep in mind that it is more likely to consolidate with buyers remaining on the buy side. But big swing trades, I don't think are likely to bring in much profit. So we will be focusing on short to medium term in this technical outlook. And if you consider the regression curve after this consolidation and the formation of this higher low, this high we can't really say it is a higher high, so that's why we can only say we have the formation of higher low, and the high is like almost identical bit on the lower side. But given the fact that Nasdaq is holding well around this 13,000 mark and it is finding some buying momentum on the lower side, we can be hopeful if it is able to hold and cross above this central pivot point area. Then I think that is likely to provide more impetus for the buyers to get involved. So it will be interesting to see how it closes the session and if it is able to rise for let's say another 100 points anywhere closer to 13,200 mark, then I think that is likely to push even further, and we will see a formation of a new swing high above this prior swing high closer to the 13,300 mark. So with that possibility in mind, we can look forward to some buying opportunities, and both these technical formations, the regression curve as well as pivot point series, are going to favor the buy trade. But for that, we also need some move on the higher side before we can consider this central pivot point also as our important support. For the time being, it is more of an resistance, so we have to keep that in mind as well. And if we consider the lower time frame charting, here we have the support in place around 13,000 mark, and keeping this confluence area of around 13,000 as our decisive marker, we can look forward to some buying trades. But I would suggest that we should buy on the breakout, not on the lower side. And if we see that Nasdaq is able to hold above this 13,000 area in today's session, and as and when we have the fresh breakout above these immediate swing high, so that might happen to today, or it might happen tomorrow, or it might happen after a couple of days. So whenever it happens, if it does happen, then only I think it will be worthwhile to get involved for the fresh trading opportunities. And in due course of time, the new highs can be created even above these prior swing highs, and the next area of interest is going to be around 13,300 mark. So we have the possibility of a further move of at least 1 percentage point if we get the breakout on the higher side above this immediate swing high of around 13,150. We can capitalize on that. But for that, as I said, we need to see that this support level is not really broken on the downside, and then it should show some consolidation with upward bias. And as and when the fresh buying impetus will come in, we will be ready to get involved for the buy trades on the breakout. So that's it from my side for today's session. If any of you have any idea or any query to share, you can write to me in the feedback section and I would be more than happy to take the discussion forward. Before I sign off, I would also like to remind of the risk associated with trading in the financial instrument, and one should be careful when using the information provided. Have a fabulous day ahead. Do subscribe to the Dukascopy webinar channel to stay updated on the market developments. See you next time. Till then, goodbye.